your whole life is like laundry in the Morgan home. Before our oldest two kids moved out, there were 7 of us in our home. And we lived in a townhome to boot. And there are a lot of implications of that number 7. A lot of symbolism in the Bible and all that kind of stuff. But I'll just tell you as a dad, 7 feels like a lot in a lot of categories, but especially in the world of laundry. It does not stop. It just literally doesn't stop. And I don't know if we have hangover from when we had a lot of kids, but now we've had 2 kids move out, and I feel like it still does not stop. But they're just our laundry machine is just always running. And maybe if you have little kids, you know what I'm talking about, because they have a special way of wearing 18 outfits a day. But I'm convinced that our laundry will be perpetually undone until that glorious day when our Lord returns. He's going to make all things new and fold our laundry. It's going to be great. When we were looking for houses, we moved in to Greenville. One major consideration was, what's the laundry room situation, But here's the thing. Our lives have this tendency to feel perpetually undone, to feel unfinished, unresolved. And as we've been in this journey, this series we've called Finished, we've been discovering, or maybe rediscovering, where we haven't finished, God has finished. Where the things in our lives feel undone, we have a God in the person of Jesus who has come and said with finality and with beauty and with grace, it is finished. And his intention for my life and for yours is to live in light of that finished work, for what he has done to transform how we live and how we understand our lives. One of the greatest sources of restlessness and unrest is trying to take into our hands what we could never do, right? As we come closer to the end of this journey of discovering things that were already done, together, we're going to look today at God's finished work and the renewal of all things. Revelation 21, we just read this, verses 5 and 6, it says this, he who is seated on the throne. So today is Palm Sunday, Jesus coming in. I loved how AJ just pointed our hearts there, the king. And there was this expectation of a coming king, and he comes in humbly on a donkey, as he goes to the cross. And then here is this image and revelation of who this Jesus is right now. And he who is seated on the throne said, behold, I'm making all things new. And he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And he said to me, it is done. I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty, I'll give from the spring of water of life without payment. So there he is, this Jesus. At the end of the story, just a few pages before maps, Jesus, the ultimate finisher. The one present in the finished work of creation, the one who saw the brokenness of the world and died to pay the penalty for our sin. He finished the payment for our sins. 3 days later, he rose in victory over sin, death, and our spiritual enemy. But even that's not the end of the story. Here we have a text that's future-oriented. A future-oriented vision, a prophetic promise that of that same Jesus coming to fully restore that which was broken. In a moment when he'll finally and fully say, it is done. And so, friends, as we start today, here's the good news at the end of God's story. The future finished work of Jesus is freedom from worry, an invitation to courage. The future finished work of Jesus is freedom from worry and an invitation to courage. You got any other worriers in here today? I'm a two-handed worrier. So this is a good one for me. I loved sitting in this one this week. Jump back to verse 1 of Revelation 21 with me. It says this, it says, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. John here is getting a vision from God of eternity. It's an eternity where the implications of the resurrection of Jesus are experienced in all of creation. Eternity where all that is promised and hoped for and first seen in Jesus as the first fruits of the resurrection is now being experienced in all of creation. It's a work of renewal and restoration. Paul tells us in Romans 8 that all of creation is waiting with eager longing to be set free from the bondage of corruption. Right, you go out, you're starting to cut your grass, right, in the spring, and you look around at the weeds that are growing, the bondage of corruption that is happening to creation. But just like Jesus' resurrected body was a real physical reality made new and whole in the most perfect possible way, so here we're getting a portrait of the eternity that God has designed. Not that we'll float around on clouds with like diapers and wings. You think about that? Like you get these pictures in our culture of what heaven is, and nobody wants to go there. I don't want to go to cloud. I don't want to wear diapers. I would want to wear like boots, right? Here Jesus comes and he says there will be a renewal of all things, a new heavens and a new earth, tangible, physical, perfect, and purposeful. So here's a simple observation that I want to make just right at the very beginning that might feel obvious, but I think is really important because it sets the foundation for living in light of the future finished work of Jesus. And it's our first point this morning. If you're taking notes, this is the first thing I want you to remember this morning, is that there will always be a tomorrow. It's one of the surest things in all of existence, is that there will always be a tomorrow. There's not an end to tomorrows. There will always be a tomorrow. I have this distinct memory of being in college. I don't know if they still do this anymore. Maybe, I hope they don't. Maybe, I don't know. I was college freshman. I did kind of the orientation thing, and I'm walking down Campus Walk, and there was all these banks offering like ugly T-shirts and Frisbees and like high interest rate credit cards to all these new freshmen. And they're like, here, get yourself in debt. And I was like, hey, this is great. What a great thing. I have a credit card. And do they still do that? Yes? Okay, oh no. It seemed awesome to me then, not so awesome now. Not awesome when my wife married me with a truckload of debt. And, I thought, well, I'll just take care of it later with my student loans, because I'm going to be I have a psychology degree. It's going to make me all sorts of money. See, here's the thing. When we're younger, we have this like overdeveloped sense of right now, right? We kind of like live in the moment, and there's not like a sense of our future, our eternity, or the implications of that. And we haven't yet taken responsibility for our tomorrows. And we just kind of exist in our todays. But here's the interesting thing that happens is something shifts as we get older, and the bills start coming due, and tomorrow starts to get scary. We're like, oh no, I have the weight of all of this in my past. And I think for some there's a renewed temptation to live with an overdeveloped sense of right now. But not because we don't know that there's tomorrow, but because we feel responsible for tomorrow, and it's just really overwhelming. And so we still live in right now, but it's just because we don't want to face tomorrow. Tomorrow's a source of what can very easily become overwhelming anxiety and a fear of how things are going to shake out. Overwhelmed with worry and anxiety about a future we can't predict or we can't handle. The quick medicine is to just deny that there is a future, that there is future implications for our life right now. And for many of us, our avoidance of tomorrow medicates the terror of a future that is out of our control. But looking forward, each of us is staring at eternity. There will always be a tomorrow. And if you're a worrier like me, there's a piece of that is a little bit terrifying, right? It's like, oh no. Like there's always going to be a tomorrow. But the hope of the gospel is that every one of our tomorrows is squarely under the authority and the sovereignty of God. Look back again at John's description in his vision from God of Revelation chapter 21. He says this, he says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw a holy city, a new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. And he will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death will be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away.'" The picture that we're presented with here is a picture or a portrait of a perpetual tomorrow. And as we consider our lives in light of the finished work of Jesus on the cross, we can lay hold of the promise that this is really only good news. Like this is the best news in the world. The hope of our tomorrows is a reality that has been restored and renewed in the new heavens and the new earth. And it's a promise that feels so good and so distant that if we're honest, it's sometimes really hard to believe. Have you ever felt like as you think about eternity, you're like, that sounds awesome. And as a Christian, you're supposed to be like, I can't wait, right? And you're like, great. And because it's so hard for us to believe sometimes, I wonder if maybe it feels like too weak of an antidote for what plagues your mind. The worry that starts to overwhelm you. But the invitation of the scriptures is to hope confidently in the soon approach of a better set of tomorrows. Friends, there'll always be a tomorrow. Yeah, I said earlier that anxiety has been something that I've wrestled with most of my life in my walk with Jesus, and there's been a journey for me of discovering, what part of that is just my physicality and my biochemical makeup, and discovering the common grace of medicine, and then what parts of it are not biochemical or physical, but maybe are ways that I'm wrestling with the Lord in my own sense of control. And keeping my hands on my understanding of the world. And here's something I've learned through the years is that when you have anxiety, when you worry about your future, it has a tendency to make you feel really isolated. But the interesting thing, and I think, the last 5 years in the planet Earth have showed us is that there are a lot of people on this earth that are facing anxiety. And it's a really interesting thing because we're all feeling isolated in our anxiety, but we're all feeling a whole lot of anxiety. There's a lot of us together feeling all alone. For some, the way that you manage your anxiety about the future is denying the reality of tomorrow. But that's not the only unhealthy way to live with anxiety. There's more. Here's what it's looked like for me in the past. When I'm consumed with a future that I can't control, I'm tempted to stop being present with the day that I've been given today. And so my mind is absent, and I'm short with my wife and my kids, and I use social media not to connect, but to distract and to medicate. The thing my heart longs for is connection and community, but I start to withdraw and to look in. But again, this vision of a future finished work of Jesus starts to speak into that reality for me and for you. Look at verse 5 again. It says, "He who is seated on the throne, he said, 'Behold, I'm making all things new.' And he also said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And he said to me, it is done. When Jesus says here in Revelation 21, when he says it is done, it is a finished work that he is again inviting us to find rest in, to live into. It's a promised finished work in the future, and that feels a lot harder to me than looking backwards at the finished work of God at creation. I'm like, look, he did it. And I can look and I can find evidence, and I can look at the cross and I can say, okay, what did happen in the cross is finished, and I can see hope of that in the resurrection. And here we're looking forward at a future finished work. And it feels harder for me. It calls out my weakness in my flesh, a weakness that, like the man in Mark's gospel, cries out to Jesus saying, I believe, help my unbelief. And so the question for us is, what's our next step? Like, what do we do with this information? How do the scriptures, how does God, by his Spirit, through his written word, being applied deeply to our hearts, how does this text come alive and make any real change in our lives? Did you catch what Jesus says right before he says it's done? He says to John, bro, write this down. He's like, you're going to forget. He's like, please write this down. They're like, write it down. Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And friends, we have to start right there, right? We have to just stop and write that. Just ask this question. Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. We're confronted with this reality that we gotta ask ourselves: do we really believe? Do I really believe that the words of Jesus are still trustworthy and true? It's a point of belief. It's a point of faith. It's one of the most important ones that we can engage with as followers of Jesus. Do we believe him as our revealed God? Do we believe that his words are trustworthy and true? Well, friends, if we have made it this far in this series, and as we've been exploring this narrative of a God who finished the only three things that were really truly finished, can I just urge you that even as I urge my own unbelieving heart that everything that's happened previously is maybe a good reason to know that he is trustworthy. Everything that we've, even just in this short series, that we've looked at, maybe there's good reason to trust this statement. Look at his finished good work at creation. Look at what has been finally and fully finished in the cross. And then we're invited to write this down. These words are trustworthy and true. And so the question is, what is it that he's saying is trustworthy and true? Jesus immediately precedes that statement by saying, behold, I am making all things new. And then he follows it with words that should be familiar and a source of peace for us at this point. And Jesus says, it is done. Behold, I'm making all things new. Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. It is done. It's done. Yeah, our family, we lived into this reality just over this last year as the Lord was preparing us to transition here to Greenville. And it was, before we moved here, it was a season of uncertainty where we knew the Lord was making a transition for our lives, but we didn't know what it was. And we found ourselves saying, well, is it going to get better? Is it going to change? What's going to, and we found ourselves just perpetually in this questioning moment. And I could stand here today and be like, I could say to, old Matt, I'd be like, hey, Matt, it's going to be great. These people are really nice. and what God has prepared for you is better than you can imagine. But so many of us, we live in this perpetual state of finding the things that we're struggling with, that we feel fearful about, and we go, is this ever going to get better? And Jesus says, write it down. Write it down. These words are trustworthy and true. It's done. It does get better. He's making all things new. He will be faithful to restore all that is broken. He is actively at work at producing a reality that is good and right and beautiful. And he can deal with your life. He can deal with the things that you're terrified in. Here's what we're invited to discover and allow to get under our skin: what Jesus promises to do tomorrow fundamentally transforms how we can experience today. What Jesus has promised to do tomorrow fundamentally transforms how we can experience today. When we live in light of God's finished work and the renewal of all things, there is a dramatic shift in how we approach today. You know, there's always going to be a tomorrow. The second thing I want us to see in the text today is that finished work tomorrow changes today. That's where Jesus is leading our hearts, that finished work tomorrow changes the reality of today. I think often we experience the inability to be connected with the significance of what's happening right now. We're not at rest and full of anxiety because we're worried about tomorrow. But in his good work in making you in his image, Jesus didn't create you to handle the whole world. He never created you to handle the whole world. He created you to be a steward. He didn't create you to be a God. He created you to be a steward of his finished work. And now as we look at how he reveals to us, as he holds out to us how it's going to shake out, his finished work in the end shows us that he is sufficient for tomorrow. He's like, I got this. Our minds are spinning with like, how is this going to play out? And he's like, I got it. I spoke and everything was. I knew what to do with sin and brokenness and evil. And he says, there is a tomorrow. There's an eternity of tomorrows, but even there, I've got it. And behold, I'm making all things new. And here, I've just given you today. I wonder if you might just steward today, because I'm inviting you to be a part of this finished work. Inviting you to be a steward. He's inviting us to steward well our participation in his creation today. He's inviting you to live as a faithful steward of something for today. Listen to what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6, verse 34. He says, don't be anxious about tomorrow. Tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. He's not saying, hey, it's not that there won't be ever anything challenging in the future. He's like, actually, tomorrow will be anxious for itself, right? And some of you are like, man, I got a lot on my plate today. And he's like, I know. Sufficient for the day is his own trouble. He's like, but you're walking through today as a steward of a work that is making all things new. And so when you hustle and when you're working hard, or when you're resting well, whatever it is he's entrusted you to steward, you're stewarding it as one who doesn't have to hold it all together, but as one who's participating in a great drama that's playing out where all things are being made new, where we're learning to live unto and under the glory of God for his good. And our good and his glory. And so this third finish line is a gift to stir in us, one, a sense of joyful anticipation. A joyful anticipation that fuels, two, a faith-filled stewardship of today with a view towards what Jesus will do with tomorrow. And it's a stewardship that isn't wholly dependent on what you feel, but rather on what he has done and what he has said he will do. And that's very different than a denial of all our tomorrows or a disengagement with right now. There will always be a tomorrow. But finished work tomorrow changes today. I wonder, do you feel spiritually dry? Low on hope? Do you find yourself without enough faith and hope to really dare to live like that? Not sure you have enough in the tank? Some of you, I was like, that's cool, but I'm not sure I have enough for one day. I want you to know today that Jesus is not dry spiritually. He's never been weary from his finished work of creation. He finished a work on the cross on your behalf as a joy that was set before him. And he is risen, and he is coming soon, and he is renewing all things. And he will finish. And he's not depending on you to be spiritually invigorated to finish his work. But he's longing for you to experience in some measure today even the grace of feeling made new. Of leaning on him and allowing his perfection and his goodness and his strength to cause something new to come alive in your heart that you can face today. Finding real and practical rest and freedom from worry starts with acknowledging both of those things, your need and his perfection. There will always be tomorrow. But finished work tomorrow changes today. I've shared this with you before. We have 7 kids, right? Typically, they're coming to the 7 or to the 11, to the 7. It's prophetic. Do we need a 7? I don't know. Got to invite our friends. We have 7 kids. 2 of them don't live with us anymore, and we're in this kind of strange season where I wasn't prepared for it. Like, you're supposed to be prepared for it. You have kids and you pour your life into them, and then suddenly you send them out, and it's like, all right. And it's hard, and it's weird, and it's painful. Last September, my second oldest, she got married, and then her husband got stationed in California, and we just had this day where, we packed 5 bags of all of her belongings, and we put her on a plane with her little dog, and we're like, see you later. We don't know when we'll see you again. It was just bizarre. It was like as bizarre as the day I welcomed her into my arms was putting her on that plane and sending her, and I was just like, and it was really hard, and at the same time, it was like, this is what, I think this is what we're supposed to do. Like, this is what, parenting is about. It's like raising a kid and preparing them for their future. And, sometimes, and when your kids are teenagers, you're like, I hope he can make peanut butter and jelly. You're just praying that they're going to be able to, right? But there's this sense of joy and delight when they mature and they move out. My oldest, she's getting ready to graduate college and move into her own apartment and start like a real job. And pay for her own insurance, praise be to God. And it's right. It's what maturity looks like for them, and it's what we long for with our other kids. Friends, your relationship with your Heavenly Father is very different than that. your relationship with your Heavenly Father is very different than that. There's a pull in us to view our lives as disciples of Jesus, as project managers of lives that he's handed back to us after we're rescued. Like he saves us and we're like, praise be to God. And we're like, I'll take it from here. We believe that to become a Christian is to graduate in the faith. And sure, maybe you need to take a couple of classes to kind of educate yourself and get yourself ready to go. And if you're going to be a leader, maybe you got to take a couple of extra classes, get that under your belt. But the goal is to head out on your own and conquer it all. And we want to thank Jesus for being the finisher of creation and the finisher of the cross. And we want to take the mantle on ourselves to be the finisher of our faith. And then we wonder why we're so overwhelmed with anxiety. Look again at Revelation 21, verse 6. I think here we have a little bit of a clue for God's intended trajectory of our life and our faith with him. A life settled in faith and ever diminishing word with ever increasing gospel swagger, ever increasing courage. And it says this in verse 6, and he said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the A to Z, the beginning and the end. He's giving this portrait of the end, and I love this quote from George Caird in his commentary on Revelation. He said this, he says, we're getting this portrait of the end. The end isn't an event. The end is not an event, but a person. He's like, it's done. I'm the beginning. I'm the end. Jesus is the beginning. Jesus is the end. Jesus is the destination. Jesus is what we are hoping for, aiming for. That's where we're headed. And then look at the second half of the verse. He says, to the thirsty I will give from the spring of water of life without payment. He gives us this vision of an eternal spring flowing from the throne of our eternal King. A hope long promised that requires nothing from you, but cost him everything. You can go read Isaiah 55. You see this portrait promised. But the implication is that you'll never be thirsty, but not because you no longer have need of a living water, but because you're in the presence of the one who is an unending source of the very thing that you need. Hear that again. You'll never be thirsty, not because you no longer have need of living water, but because you will forever in eternity be in the presence of the one who has an unending source of everything that you need. The last thing I want you to see this morning is that courage comes in dependence. Courage comes in dependence. As you wrestle with worry that's facing you today, I want to encourage you with this, that you could depend on Jesus today. You could find yourself in deep dependence on Jesus today because he's created you to depend on him forever. You can depend on Jesus today because he's created you to depend on him forever. That's living into your created intention, is to depend on Jesus. And I think this is really key because it points us to the trajectory of our relationship with God. When we think about the shape of our relationship with Jesus in eternity, central to that relationship is dependence upon him forever. He's not hoping you grow up and move out. He's hoping you grow up and move in. He's actually calling you to grow up and move in. I mean, we use the language around here of maturing and multiplying disciples of Jesus. Friends, that happens through your increased dependence, not your increased mastery, your increased dependence. Because here's what that will produce in you. It will produce in you a life of faith that's defined by Jesus himself. It's a place of daring to trust him with the everyday stuff of your life, but it's also the place of daring to walk in wisdom because you've been in the presence of the one who is wisdom. It's a place of great courage. And so it's not an invitation to just be like, hey, I can do whatever I want because I'm just depending on Jesus. No. It's a place where you're depending on him to form in you a life that is a reflection of our perfect older brother who lived the life that we should have lived and died the death that we should have died and rose victorious over sin, death, and hell. Courage comes in dependence. Think of it this way. When we look at the final finished work of Jesus and we look at what we're given, we see an eternal presence with Jesus and an eternal dependence on Jesus. The best thing in all eternity that God could give us is Jesus. And the incredible news of the gospel for you today is that you don't have to wait for Jesus. You get to have him now. You get to join with him now in the renewal of all things with a confidence that he will finish the work. In some measure now, and an increasing measure as you mature, you can experience what he's intended for you in all of your tomorrows. It's right for you to need Jesus as you steward today. It's right for you to depend upon Jesus. Courage comes in dependence. Growing in maturity and finding freedom from worry with courage and gospel swagger is looking today at the Alpha and the Omega and trusting with dependence on his true words that he will get it done. He'll give it to you not as an example, but as a gift. Invitation is to let that get under your skin as you look for confidence while you traverse the uncertain waters of the remainder of this year, the next 10 years, the birth of children, the sending out of children, the completion of degrees, all the years left before you. What he's giving you is his tattoo. His work that he finished in the renewal of all things. Only 3 things have ever been finished, really, truly. God's finished work in creation is freedom from striving and an invitation to rest. His finished work on the cross is freedom from shame and an invitation to authenticity, to live just as the same person on the inside and the outside. And the future finished work of Jesus is freedom from worry and an invitation to courage. So friends, here's the good news. We can find rest in the finished work of Jesus. So just like the last couple of weeks, I want to invite you to pray with me. Today is just a prayer for one who worries. Would you pray with me? Oh God, my King and my Lord, you have arrayed the great expanse with innumerable stars. You placed the sand as the boundary for the sea. You forget not a single bird, but feed them daily from the bounty of your hand. O God, my King and my Lord, you have made me in your image. You've given breath to each of my days. You've loved me with an unfailing and undeserved love. Forgive me for my lack of trust, my disbelief, and the weakness of my understanding. I've cast myself into a sea of worry, and there I'm floundering. My stomach turns and roils, and I can think of only my fear. Anxiety and dread threaten to overcome me, yet you give comfort. Do not fear, for I am with you, and you lend strength as standing firm above the waves. You offer me your hand, and you pull me from the depths of my dark doubt to the assurance of your ever nearness and your complete security. Why do I worry when I have you, my great rescuer? Why am I restless when my King is the calmer of storms? Why do I dread when my Lord has secured peace for me? I mislay my trust, and none other can carry it. but they crumble like cliffs. They fall dashed to pieces and are swept away. Oh God, my King and my Lord, help me. My trust belongs to you. You alone are able, worthy. Your mercies are as innumerable as the stars. Your love restrains my foolishness. You do not forget me. You do not forget me. In Jesus' name, amen.